The microphone felt cold in her hand, but Lorraine's smile was colder. "Some people forget who gave them their first real chance," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness, but every word sliced me open. My cheeks burned as everyone laughed. The same executives who'd once humiliated me, the donors who nodded politely, my own relatives smiling in forced amusement. She lifted her glass, diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light, and added, "Without me, Harper would still be delivering coffee, pretending to be important." I gripped my champagne flute, so hard my knuckles whitened. My lips trembled, but I forced a smile, shaking in ways no one could see. Rage, shame, and disbelief tangled into a raw knot in my chest. What the hell just happened to me? My aunt's eyes flicked to mine, sharp and calculating, daring me to speak. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was wrong, but something inside me, something quiet, burning, and furious, told me to stay calm. "You'll see soon enough, Aunt Lorraine." I leaned back, heart hammering, whispering under my breath, "You're right. Without you, I'd have nothing to prove." I'm Harper Quinn, 27, and that night, staring across the ballroom at the woman who had broken me, I vowed I'd make her regret ever underestimating me. 2 years earlier, I was excited and nervous, carrying a new laptop and a folder of dreams bigger than my tiny apartment. Lorraine had promised me a career, a stepping stone to something real, and I believed her. She wore designer heels that clicked like gunshots, her perfume sharp and suffocating, and her smile made me melt with admiration. I wanted to be like her, strong, polished, admired. At first, she helped me, corrected my presentations, dressed me in tailored blouses, introduced me to clients like I belonged. But soon, her advice felt like chains. She corrected my tone, my posture, even how I laughed. Any sign of independence or opinion became a lecture or a sly insult. "Don't get too big for your boots, Harper," she'd say, each syllable a trap. I thought I could handle it, but she grew darker, sharper. She laughed when I tripped over words in meetings, whispered behind my back in hallways, and made sure others heard. I began shrinking in my own skin. Then came the email leak. She twisted harmless frustrations I had written privately into proof that I was ungrateful and unprofessional. The board read them aloud. I froze, my chest tight, every heartbeat echoing like a drum of humiliation. Lorraine's eyes sparkled. I was trapped. The day I got fired was the day my world cracked open. I stood in the glass-walled boardroom, my stomach twisting, as executives read her emails line by line. Each word they said echoed in my skull, loud and shameful. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to scream. Lorraine, poised and perfect, smiled like a predator. "Maybe this will teach you humility," she whispered under her breath. My mother sat beside her, nodding slowly, murmuring, "Harper, thank your aunt for giving you the opportunity." My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. How could they all be so blind to her cruelty? I walked out, head held high but broken inside. My apartment felt emptier than ever, every piece of furniture a reminder that I had nothing. Nights passed with gnawing hunger, tears soaking my pillow and silence pressing in on me like walls closing. I called no one. I begged no one. The world I had trusted, my own family, had abandoned me. And the woman who destroyed me? Lorraine strolled on, unscathed as if nothing had happened. My only thought, bitter and raw, was a quiet vow: I will not stay down. You will regret every cruel word, every smirk. I rented the smallest apartment I could find, a single room with a cracked window and a bed that creaked with every movement. I counted coins to buy groceries, boiled noodles until the water turned brown, and learned what it meant to survive in silence. Lorraine's texts didn't stop. "You'll never make it without me," she wrote, every message dripping venom. I deleted them without reading, but the ache they left was heavy. The nights were the worst. I'd stare at the ceiling, heart racing, remembering her laugh, the gleam in her eyes when she saw me humiliated, anger, and despair wrestled inside me. But slowly I realized they were fuel. Fuel for something bigger, something she could never imagine. I started freelancing, small projects at first, but each completed task built something inside me, a quiet confidence. No one knew of my efforts. No one cared to notice, except me. And so a plan began to form, not a reckless, screaming revenge, but a slow, deliberate reclamation of my life. Every email, every late-night design, every perfect pitch was a brick in the foundation. And one day, Aunt Lorraine would walk into a room, thinking she had power, and realize she had been playing right into my hands. It took months, maybe a year, but Quinn and Company was born in the corner of my tiny apartment. A desk, a laptop, a single phone line, and a small team of loyal, talented friends who believed in me. I watched our little agency grow quietly, each project a small victory, each client a small rebellion against the life I'd been forced to leave behind. Then, one afternoon, a resume arrived. I recognized the name instantly, Lorraine Whitford. My stomach sank. My chest tightened. She was applying for a job at my company. My mind raced. I could feel the past and present colliding, a wave of betrayal, anger, and satisfaction all tangled together. I smiled, but deadly. Lorraine didn't know. Not yet. I could watch her strut into the building, believing she still held all the power, unaware that I was now the one in control. The slow burn had begun, and it would end in a way that she could never recover from. I stared at the resume for a long moment, heart hammering against my ribs. Lorraine Whitford, the woman who had torn my life apart, was asking for a job at the company I built from nothing. My fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling it slightly, but I forced myself to breathe. There would be no rash decisions, no shouting, no public confrontation. This would be slow, methodical, every move calculated. I set up the interview under a fake name, Ms. Morgan. Calm, polite, professional. I watched her strut into the room, the same high heels clicking against the polished floor, head held high, perfectly coiffed hair glinting under the fluorescent lights. Her perfume, sharp, suffocating, hit me like a punch to the stomach. She smiled at me, a smile that could slice steel, confident she was still untouchable. She began talking before I could even greet her, listing achievements and spinning stories about her past, all lies coated in charm. I nodded, taking notes silently, letting her arrogance fill the room. Every smirk, every condescending glance, only fueled my determination. When she left, I closed the door and exhaled slowly, tasting the thrill of control. She had no idea she was stepping into my web, and the thought of her arrogance meeting its match made my lips twitch. Soon, I whispered to myself, soon, she'll wish she'd never crossed me. I spent the next week watching her, taking notes like a detective. Lorraine didn't change. She belittled the receptionist for minor mistakes, corrected my employees with cutting precision, and smiled sweetly while whispering poisonous words to clients. The more I observed, the more her narcissism revealed itself. Every glance, every sentence designed to assert control. One afternoon, she cornered a junior designer, smirking as she corrected the smallest detail. "You might want to rethink your priorities," she said, her tone sugar-coated but venomous. I clenched my fists behind my back, fury simmering, while the young designer shrank under her gaze. I wanted to step in, to yell, to expose her right there, but I didn't. I let it happen. Every cruel word, every manipulative smile, every small act of terror she inflicted built the foundation for her downfall. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing each of her habits, each word she used to gaslight and control. My mind churned with plans, possibilities, and strategies. The fire inside me was quiet but intense, waiting for the perfect moment. The next day, a small clue presented itself, a client she overpromised to. If I played this right, her arrogance would lead to disaster. She thinks she's untouchable, I whispered, eyes glinting with anticipation. She has no idea what's coming. Lorraine tried to charm me during a casual lunch, leaning across the table, her laugh a weapon as sharp as her nails. I've always been the smarter one, Harper, she said, tilting her head, eyes glinting with mockery. You might have survived without me, but don't forget who shaped you. I sipped my water, keeping my expression neutral, letting her words hang in the air like a storm cloud. Inside, my heart hammered and my stomach turned, but I stayed calm. Her arrogance was her weakness, and I intended to exploit it fully. She leaned back, smirking, completely oblivious to the fact that I was documenting every lie, every manipulation. Her confidence made her predictable. Every sneer, every glance, every subtle insult was a thread I could pull. As the lunch ended, I shook her hand, feeling the thrill of control surge through me. She walked away thinking she'd won a victory, never realizing she had just exposed another crack in her armor. That night, I reviewed my notes and smiled quietly to myself. Every cruel action, every manipulative word was a building block for the perfect reversal. She's playing checkers while I'm playing chess, I whispered, feeling a shiver of satisfaction. And she has no idea her game is about to collapse. It was a rainy Tuesday when I first tested her. A major client had called, confused about a project Lorraine had promised more than we could deliver. I stayed quiet, letting her scramble. I watched her confidence crack as she tried to explain, lied, floundered. The staff whispered behind their hands, and I felt my pulse steady with quiet triumph. She didn't notice my calm. She never did. Every lie, every misstep, every gaslit moment was feeding the trap I had set. Lorraine had spent years perfecting cruelty and manipulation, but in my company, her arrogance became a liability. Later, she came to my office, smug, certain she had the upper hand. I can fix this, she said, voice dripping with false charm. I nodded, calm, collected, letting her think she was indispensable. By the time she left, the client was satisfied, not because of her, but because of the quiet, invisible work I had done to protect my company. She had no idea. I sat back in my chair, rain tapping against the window, heart calm, mind racing. The slow burn was working. Every day, every small victory, brought me closer to the day Lorraine would finally realize she was outplayed. She will crumble, and I will be the one watching. One evening, I walked past her office and caught her talking to a client, using her signature charm to spin a story I knew was false. The client's eyebrows furrowed in doubt, and I felt a surge of satisfaction ripple through me. She was weaving lies to maintain control, but I could see the threads starting to fray. Later, as I checked emails, I found a note from her assistant complaining about Lorraine's unrealistic demands. My lips curved into a quiet smile. Lorraine, the woman who had destroyed me, was slowly revealing the cracks in her facade. That night, alone in my apartment, I traced every detail in my notebook. Every manipulation, every arrogance-laced smile, every act of cruelty I had endured became a tool in my hands. She had built her empire on intimidation, and I would dismantle it with precision. I closed the notebook and leaned back, watching the city lights blink through my window. For the first time in years, the rage inside me felt like power. The slow, careful, deliberate revenge I had dreamed of was no longer a plan. It was a living, breathing reality. Soon, Aunt Lorraine, I whispered into the dark, you'll see exactly what it means to be outplayed. Lorraine cornered me in the hallway that morning, the sharp click of her heels echoing against the marble floor. She leaned close, eyes glinting with triumph, voice syrupy but poisonous. You know, Harper, some people are just fragile. It's okay if you can't keep up. Her hand brushed my arm, intentional, condescending, and I felt a shiver of disgust. I forced my lips into a polite smile, nodding as if agreeing, while my heart hammered like it was trying to escape my chest. Every nerve screamed to push her away, to call her out, but I stayed calm. That calm was my armor, my weapon. Her laugh followed me down the hall, light and mocking, and I imagined it carving into my very bones. But this time, instead of crushing me, it ignited something cold and deliberate. I would not let her terrorize anyone here, not anymore. Later, in my office, I reviewed her email trails, memos, and notes. Every manipulation, every small act of cruelty she had committed here, catalogued and mapped. Each one was another stepping stone toward the moment she would finally face me, not the weak girl she thought she had broken, but the woman who had grown while she stumbled in arrogance. I traced her schedule, her patterns, her smiles, the moments she believed she was untouchable. I let the realization settle deep in my chest. She has no idea she's already in my hands. The next day, a minor sabotage. Lorraine had promised a client something impossible, a flashy presentation she couldn't deliver. I stayed quiet, letting her scramble, her frustration barely concealed behind smiles and clipped words. The staff whispered, glances darting between us. Lorraine's confidence faltered ever so slightly, just enough to see the cracks forming. Later, she stormed into my office, eyes blazing, voice low and dangerous. "I don't understand why the client is upset," she said, tapping the report in front of me like she expected me to solve it for her. I nodded calmly, lips pressed in a tight line, saying nothing. She left, shaking her head in disbelief, unaware she had already walked into my trap. That night, alone in my apartment, I lit a candle and traced her every action in my notebook. Every condescending glance, every petty insult, every act of arrogance, each detail meticulously documented. I imagined the moment I would reveal the truth to the world, and a cold thrill ran through me. "She will never see it coming," I whispered to the shadows. And for the first time in years, the rage inside me felt clean, precise, like a blade honed to perfection. Lorraine overplayed again a week later. She tried to take credit for a successful client project, weaving a web of lies and exaggerations. Her charm was weaponized, her eyes calculating, her smile a blade. I watched silently as the staff exchanged uneasy glances, some biting their lips to hide frustration. When the client came to me, confused and irritated, I smiled softly, calm and soothing. I explained every detail, every accomplishment, and the client left satisfied, not because of Lorraine, but because I quietly held the threads of truth. Later, she approached me, smug and self-assured, expecting praise or at least acknowledgement. I nodded politely, watching her posture tighten as I withheld approval. My heart thumped with a quiet thrill. Every misstep she made, every arrogant act, was feeding the perfect storm I was building. I poured myself a glass of water and stared out the window at the city skyline, thinking of all the ways she had hurt me and the woman I had become. She had destroyed my life once, but now I held all the power. Every cruel word she had ever said was stored, ready to be repaid in a way she could never predict. Soon, Lorraine, soon, you'll learn what it means to truly lose. Family dinner. My mother had insisted on it, a chance to reconnect with Lorraine. I sat stiffly at the table, noting the glint in her eyes as she smiled at relatives, perfectly composed, radiant. But I knew her true face, the one she only showed when she thought no one was watching. She made small jabs at me under the guise of humor, commenting on my small successes and the miracle it was that I was running a company at all. My stomach twisted, heart aching. My cheeks burned with humiliation while my mother shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension but saying nothing. I smiled politely, clenching my hands under the table until my nails dug into my palms. Every laugh she forced, every glimmering smirk, only sharpened my resolve. I imagined myself stripping her confidence away, piece by piece, exposing her to the world as the manipulative, cruel woman she truly was. Later that night, I retreated to my apartment, staring at the floor as memories of her previous betrayals washed over me. The lies, the humiliation, the endless manipulation. I let the pain sit with me, heavy and raw, and then I transformed it into fuel. You will not have this victory again, Lorraine. Not now, not ever. And when it's over, you'll know what it feels like to be powerless. I had begun winning allies in the office. Staff who had quietly witnessed Lorraine's cruelty, but were too intimidated to act. Slowly, I earned their trust, offering guidance, support, and acknowledgement where Lorraine had belittled them. They began to confide in me, sharing incidents I hadn't known about. The stories made my chest ache, the petty humiliation, whispered insults, threats dressed as mentorship. But the ache fueled me, not weakened me. Every revelation became a tool in my hands. I listened, nodded, and documented it all. Lorraine, in her arrogance, continued to manipulate and gaslight, unaware that her allies were quietly shifting loyalty. She laughed too loud, corrected too sharply, and believed she was untouchable. Every overstep was recorded in my mind and in my files. That night, I leaned back in my chair, a quiet smile on my lips. The slow, careful unraveling of Lorraine Whitford had begun. The woman who had destroyed me was about to step into a world where she had no control, no power, and no escape. And I will be the one watching, calm, collected, and victorious. I watched Lorraine make a mistake I had orchestrated ever so quietly. She had promised a client a feature my team hadn't even finalized yet. I let her flounder, sitting just outside the room, pretending to be busy with my laptop. Her hands flew over papers, pen tapping frantically, her perfect nails scratching across the desk as she tried to smooth the impossible. I could hear the client's confusion, feel the tension in the room. Lorraine's laughter, forced and too bright, rang hollow. She had no idea that the true solutions were quietly ready, polished, and in my hands. I stepped in with calm, deliberate words, clarifying details, answering questions, and guiding the meeting without her noticing my subtle control. When it was over, Lorraine approached me, all smiles and charm, expecting praise. I nodded lightly, neutral, giving nothing. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, suspicion sparking like a candle flicker in a dark room. That was all I needed, a hint that she was beginning to realize the balance of power had shifted. That night, I lit a candle on my desk, tracing every move of hers in my notebook. Each error, each arrogance-filled action, was another thread in the web I was weaving. Lorraine thought she was untouchable. Soon, she would learn how it felt to be cornered by someone she had underestimated. One morning, I overheard her whispering to a client, claiming credit for a project she barely touched. Her voice was smooth, confident, and poisonous. The client looked uneasy, brow furrowed, glancing at me as if searching for confirmation. I smiled, gently, calm, letting the silence hang. Lorraine's miscalculation had exposed her lie. Later, I approached her privately, smiling, letting her arrogance make her speak first. She tried to gaslight me, claiming, "I'm only doing what's best for the company." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a mask I had seen unravel before. I nodded politely, letting her spiral quietly, each word she spoke adding to her eventual collapse. That evening, I walked past her office, catching her talking down a junior employee. Her tone was sweet, fake, but each subtle insult cut deep. My chest ached, not from pain, but from the memory of every similar moment I had endured in the past. I clenched my jaw and let it fuel me. I could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed persona. The more she lied, the more she revealed herself. And I would be ready when the final curtain fell. Soon, Lorraine, your world is about to unravel. I invited a key client to my office, careful to keep it low profile. Lorraine, convinced of her indispensability, followed closely, smiling and cooing. She didn't realize that the client had already noticed her arrogance, her lies, her constant manipulations. I spoke calmly, answering every question with clarity, with warmth, and with quiet authority. The client relaxed, leaning in, nodding at me. Lorraine's forced grin faltered. I watched the moment she realized she had lost influence, her body stiffening, hands curling into fists. Later, I documented the interaction, noting every subtle flicker of her panic. Lorraine's ego, so inflated, made her predictable. Every misstep, every overreach, was fuel for the trap I had built patiently for months. That night, I lit a candle in my apartment, tracing each detail of her behavior, replaying every cruel word she had ever whispered to me, every smirk that had once broken me. And I smiled quietly, coldly. Her downfall wasn't impulsive, it was inevitable. You will never see me coming, Aunt Lorraine. Never. Lorraine made her next move, arrogant as ever. She tried to convince the board to reassign a major account to her alone, flaunting her charm, her sharp nails tapping against the table like small hammers of judgment. I sat quietly, letting her words bounce harmlessly off me. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, sensing her self-importance but unsure how to intervene. I smiled faintly, letting them see subtle acknowledgement. Slowly, they began to lean toward me, to trust in calm competence over her arrogant theatrics. Later, in my office, I reviewed her errors. Each overconfidence-fueled misstep, each gaslighting comment, each small humiliation she had inflicted, they all mapped perfectly into the web of her undoing. I imagined her pride crumbling in front of clients and colleagues, a spectacular, justified collapse. I poured a glass of wine and leaned against the window, city lights glittering like distant stars. The slow burn had grown hot now, every careful move edging me closer to the moment Lorraine would finally realize she was powerless. The trap is set. The pieces are all in place, and soon as she will fall. The gala, a high-profile event I had organized, every detail planned meticulously. Lorraine believed she was the star, ready to shine, to mock me publicly and cement her control. The chandelier sparkled above, glasses clinked, and the air buzzed with anticipation. I greeted guests with a quiet smile, letting Lorraine strut past me, oblivious that the night's script had already been rewritten. Her charm, her poise, even her calculated smile, all meaningless now. She was about to be exposed, publicly, in front of everyone who had ever thought she was untouchable. As the room filled with laughter, polite chatter, and the low hum of glasses, I watched her every move, every glance, every subtle smirk. The audience believed she was in control, but she was walking into the culmination of every cruel word she had ever spoken to me. I sipped my champagne, calm and poised, heart steady, mind sharp. The final act was close. The slow burn, the careful, deliberate planning, was about to erupt into the moment of poetic justice I had imagined countless times in lonely nights. Soon, Lorraine, you will see what it means to have underestimated me. The gala sparkled, the air thick with perfume, laughter, and the soft clink of crystal glasses. Lorraine glided through the room like a queen, her glinting under the chandeliers, her smile a weapon honed over decades. She believed every eye admired her. Every whispered comment reinforced her illusion of control. I watched from the edge of the room, sipping my champagne, calm and composed. Every detail of the evening had been orchestrated. The stage, the lighting, the seating arrangements, everything designed to reveal her true face without a word from me. She approached the main table, brimming with charm, offering smiles that were meant to disarm. I let her bask in her imagined victory, knowing that tonight the mirror would finally shatter. As the first speaker began praising the company's successes, subtle whispers rippled through the crowd. Guests murmured about inconsistencies in Lorraine's past claims. Nothing I said, only the facts I had gathered meticulously over months. She noticed the shift, the hesitation in glances, the small stares that had once been hers alone to command. Panic flickered in her eyes. I smiled faintly. Every cruel word, every subtle humiliation she had delivered to me had been transformed into precision, patience, and preparation. And tonight she would fall. Lorraine tried to regain control, leaning into conversations, laughing too loud, tilting her head like she always did, trying to charm the room back into submission. But every attempt only highlighted the cracks. A key client whispered to another, referencing her overpromises. A former employee exchanged a glance with me that said everything. She moved to confront me, her voice dripping with sweetness, trying to gaslight. "Harper, I don't know why the client seems upset. They should know I handle things best." Her tone, once commanding, now sounded desperate, faltering. I looked at her calmly, my expression serene, almost affectionate. "Actually, Lorraine," I said softly, letting the words linger like smoke in the air, "I have all the records. Every promise, every misstep, every claim you made." My voice was quiet, but the weight hit like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the room. She froze, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Every person she had ever manipulated, every whispered lie she had spun, now bore witness to her unraveling. For the first time in years, she was powerless, exposed, vulnerable. My heart pounded with a mixture of triumph and relief, my hands trembling just slightly from the intensity of the moment. The crowd leaned in, every eye on Lorraine as the evidence was displayed, emails, documents, client feedback, and employee statements. I watched her expression shift from disbelief to fury, to panic, to defeat. Every mask she had worn for decades fell away under the bright lights. She tried to smile, to deflect, but the words of countless people she had gaslight hung in the room like daggers. I, she stammered, but no one listened. She was invisible. My chest ached from all the years of humiliation, the nights spent alone, the quiet despair. But now, standing tall, I let a single, calm smile grace my lips. I had endured, had planned, had waited, and finally justice, meticulously earned and clean, was mine. As the crowd murmured their approval and admiration for my calm composure, Lorraine's head hung low. She had never understood patience, strategy, or integrity. And now, she faced the consequence of her arrogance in full view of the people she had once believed she controlled. Tears prickled my eyes, not from sadness but from release. The weight of years of manipulation, shame, and pain was finally lifted. Later that night, I walked alone through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting in puddles from the rain. I had imagined this moment countless times. Her downfall, my rise, the clarity of victory. Yet the reality was more profound, more emotional than I had ever allowed myself to feel. I thought of every cruel whisper, every mocking smile, every subtle trap Lorraine had set. And I realized none of it could touch me now. I had grown beyond her lies, beyond the suffocating world she had tried to impose. I held my phone, reading congratulatory messages from clients, employees, and friends, people who had witnessed my patience, my strength, my careful planning. And I smiled again, quietly, because no text, no applause, no recognition could replace the satisfaction of knowing that I had outlasted her, and done so with dignity. Lorraine's world, once polished and untouchable, had crumbled under the weight of her own arrogance. And I, Harper Quinn, had built something stronger, something real, something unbreakable. Weeks later, I sat in my office, sunlight streaming through the windows, my team bustling around me with projects, laughter, and energy. Lorraine's absence had left a void, a silence filled with the calm, competent authority I had claimed. I reflected on every step, the humiliation, the pain, the nights of tears, the slow, patient planning. Every moment had brought me here, to a place of triumph, self-respect, and genuine power. I had not stooped, had not lied, had not cheated. I had waited, observed, and acted with precision. A knock on the door broke my reverie. My assistant smiled. "The client from the gala wants to meet. They said you handled everything perfectly." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I was calm, poised, and fully in control. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly feel the weight of victory, not just in business, but in life. Lorraine had underestimated me. Every word, every smirk, every cruel manipulation had been her undoing. And I had emerged stronger, wiser, untouchable. I leaned back in my chair, eyes soft but shining. This is what it means to survive, to rise, to claim your worth. And nothing, and no one, will ever take it from me again.